Hi there, welcome to Trading Day. We are standing by for U.S. President Donald Trump, awaiting his live reaction to the Supreme Court striking down many of his major tariffs. We'll bring you that live. Let's get to the big stories, though, we're bringing you from the BNN Bloomberg newsroom. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down sweeping global tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. The court says Trump exceeded his authority by invoking a federal emergency powers law to impose the so-called reciprocal tariffs. He also, of course, had targeted countries that he accused of allowing fentanyl to be trafficked into the U.S. Now, this ruling does not address the question of whether importers will get refunds. The U.S. government has already pocketed, reportedly, more than $170 billion U.S. in levies. Canadian retail sales saw a decline in December, but they are on track to rebound at the very start of the year. StatsCan says receipts for retailers dropped 0.4% in December, but in a flash estimate, StatsCan suggests that they rose 1.5% in January. The agency says despite U.S. tariffs fueling uncertainty, consumers continue to shop in 2025, with sales up compared with 2024. Eldorado Gold is one of the biggest decliners on the TSX today. The company says production will be lower due to the delay of a key mine startup in Greece. Output won't start until the third quarter. It had expected that production would begin this quarter, and this is cutting the company's production forecast by 15%. And you can see the TSX actually trading in record territory today, even though the direct impact of the Supreme Court ruling on Canadian tariffs won't be that big in the short term anyway. And let's have a look at U.S. markets. They too rallied in the wake of this ruling, and we did see a move up in big importers like Nike or Lululemon, although they gave up some of the gains. So the court's striking down the sweeping tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Let's get more on this from Peter MacKay, former Minister of Foreign Affairs under Stephen Harper. Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know it's a moving target. I know it's a moving target here. In fact, we weren't really in the crosshairs for these tariffs. I know Desjardins is saying that our taxes were previously under these tariffs about 3.7% import or levies. It only goes down to about 3.1%. But of course, it may have an impact on these CUSMA trade negotiations.
I think that's right. It's a major blow politically to the president and his administration, but its impact on Canada is negligible. And as you've noted, there's modest uptick in both the U.S. and Canadian markets. But in reality, there is no major impact here on things like lumber, steel, aluminum, auto parts. Those commodities will not be impacted by the Supreme Court striking down the president's use of IEEPA, this international emergency economic measure that he's been using as a cudgel to leverage other countries in trade negotiations through tariffs.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for reminding us that the levies on our steel and aluminum and some autos or auto parts still in place. And of course, Trump has made it clear, he and his team, we're ready to use other tools here. We're not backing down on tariffs. Well,
that's right. And that's what makes this decision, while significant, the president himself describing it as historic, most consequential, as he is prone to hyperbole, but there is already talk that they will find other means, legal or otherwise, to try to use tariffs. It is his favorite word, as he likes to remind us. And as you said, Andrew, this is perhaps, if nothing else, a bit of a psychological boost to Canadian negotiators, people like Dominic LeBlanc, who will be heading to Washington in June with the trade negotiator and our new U.S. ambassador, to take on the president and his team in these renegotiations of CUSMA, which are mandated and in fact mandatory after 6 years.
You must be amazed. You dealt with your U.S. counterparts during your years in government, in the cabinet. How strange are these times with such an aggressive tack taken against Canada on defence and trade by the White House?
Oh, look, Andrew, it's Twilight Zone. I mean, we've always had such a strong working relationship, positive relationship, whether it be on security matters, trade, most certainly, people to people, administration to administration. And look, I want to believe that that goodwill does exist in many quarters. The president has changed the rules of the game, flipped the script, if you will. And it is a moment in time and one that Canada is going to have to negotiate carefully. The Prime Minister has promised that he's going to get a deal. That was his primary pitch to voters just less than a year ago. And so he's now in a position to deliver. And it has massive implications on the Canadian economy, let's be clear, not just in those sectors, but God forbid if we don't get this trade agreement secured. And the president has already mused that he may go to a bilateral agreement with Mexico and Canada. And so there's a lot at stake and a lot will be on the table in these negotiations.
And of course, you were Foreign Affairs Minister, but also Minister of Defence. And so, I mean, what do you when our nation is openly saying we're going to reduce our dependence on U.S. weapons systems, for example, it's really come to an amazing point.
Well, the uncertainty and the inability to count on the Americans with respect to this important economic relationship has led us to make other decisions. And, you know, pulling away from that reliance, I think, has always been a good idea. Canada is fortunate in the sense that we have other countries, other major trading blocs like the European Union, the Asia Pacific, and free trade with those regions. And so we need to exercise those options. We also need to be, let's be clear, we need to get oil and gas into the world market, our minerals, critical minerals, our ag sector resources. All of this is there for Canada to take full advantage of, and to wean ourselves off the over-reliance on the U.S. market. We've talked about it for years, just like getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers. We just now have to pull the trigger and take action.
I mean, some research from the Federal Reserve in the U.S. indicates that 90% of the tariff burden has fallen on U.S. consumers. And then the administration lashed back at that report, saying that people should be disciplined for daring to come out with research like that. But it's interesting how Trump seems to have got away with it. I mean, he says, well, I'm interested in cutting the cost of living, but his tariffs have been paid for by the U.S. people.
Well, that's exactly right. The U.S. people, companies, startups, small businesses, and it's facts, not feelings, that matter in this discussion. And yet the president, there's no question, has reaped the reward in terms of billions of dollars, some estimate as high as $150, $170 billion that have been collected on tariffs. But that is also potentially coming out of the American economy. And now that it'll have to be presumably paid back to some extent, this is also going to create a massive challenge, perhaps legally and otherwise, a bit like unscrambling an egg, Andrew. So we're seeing still more uncertainty, more bluster coming from the president. Canada, on the other hand, has to steady itself and look to other markets, while at the same time looking to resolve the outstanding issues around the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement.
Of course, you come from the Conservative side, but how do you I mean, it's a broad question, but how do you think Ottawa has handled this tariff challenge, this unprecedented tariff war that's been launched by Trump?
Well, it's a very fine line, you know, to perhaps use the expression threading a needle in a haystorm is very difficult. And yet there have been not necessarily missteps, but there has been political nuance and perhaps some risk in provoking the president, and some may disagree with me. The speech in Davos, the position on Palestine, seemingly looking to China and other countries in the wake of this turmoil in the United States. And even, as you mentioned, signaling very openly that we're going to look elsewhere in terms of our defense agreements and defense partnering perhaps on new equipment that Canada badly needs. While at the same time we have, been so interwoven with the U.S. security apparatus through NORAD and NATO, talk of a Golden Dome missile defense and F-35s, this is still very much up in the air, but all of which could be seen as provocation or something that has certainly aggravated Donald J. Trump.
It's tricky, as you say. Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure, Andrew. All the best.
Peter MacKay, strategic advisor at Deloitte Canada and also a former Conservative Foreign Affairs and Defence Minister, among other jobs in the Cabinet and elsewhere. Coming up, we're going to take a look at how markets are reacting to that U.S. Supreme Court decision. Supreme Court striking down sweeping global tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Let's drill into how the markets are reacting. We're joined by Dec Malarkey, Managing Director of Investment Strategy and Asset Allocation at SLC Management. Dec, thanks for joining us, and apologies if we do have to break away from you to go to the President live. Your brief takeaway: we saw stocks rally. Presumably the tariff burden on U.S. consumers may be lifted here, at least for a while.
We did indeed. You're right, and it was like a tale of two rallies. Like right out of the box when the headline hit, there was a bump, particularly in consumer-related stocks, just as you mentioned, because those are the ones that are at the core of this, be it apparel, footwear, some appliances. And then as the details came out, that faded a bit. And the primary thing there was that the Supreme Court, although they had ruled in favor of squashing these tariffs, they had pretty much pushed it back to lower courts to decide on the refunds, which is going to be a messy process. And I think initially investors were hoping they would opine on that quite quickly, but that'll have to go through the courts. So I think everything calmed down, and some of the rally backed off a little on that news.
That's interesting. Maybe we could pop up an intraday for Lululemon, Lulu, or Nike, NKE, because they initially bounced on people saying, well, all the stuff they bring in from Asia, they'll face less of a tariff burden. But then the stocks gave up some of the gains.
Exactly, and this captures it perfectly. That you got that bump right out of the box, just as the headline ran across. But then, as everybody dug into the news, you saw that kind of sell-off, or if you will, a correction on that. And of course, the White House was getting their message out alongside this, saying, "Oh, we have other alternatives here. We can impose other things." And I know we're right on hearing the president come on and speak about some of this, but the markets started to balance that out and recognize that this may not be immediate.
CNN quoted the president as saying this was disgraceful, but I'm sure we'll hear from the man himself shortly.
Well, he's very colorful in all his language, as everybody knows, of course. So, yes, he got right out there on that. But it is interesting. I mean, it's positive for Canada because they were getting hit with this, fentanyl case, and that will be backed off here. So that may give some relief to Canada. But as I said, it is a bit of a long road from here in terms of where this is going to end up.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of our goods that were covered by the North American Free Trade Agreement have been exempt from tariffs, but certainly our steel and our aluminum and our parts of our car industry have been hurt here. What is your broad strategy, apart from tariffs? I know that's a bit, how is the play, Mrs. Lincoln, but what is your broad strategy for the U.S. market?
So the main thing is to be kind of super diversified. I mean, that's kind of the number one thing, because it's hard to pick the AI winners and losers, and that's kind of dominating a lot of what's going on. The AI theme is alive and well, but everybody is calibrating around where is that going to end up. And the broadening out has been a complete positive thing. You've seen that happening within the S&P this year in terms, and in fact, it started back in October of last year, where you've seen reallocations away from tech. Some of that was concerns around bubbles, but also to the beat up sectors, and they're doing well. And you're also then seeing diversification to small cap have outperformed large cap for over that period of time. And then you see income producing stocks like high dividend are outperforming momentum. And again, there was concerns, I think, around valuations on tech. But I think at this point, it's not just a sell tech. Even within tech, there's quite bifurcation in terms of hardware, or certainly chips, are doing very well, and then the software names are getting beat up. And then I would say probably indiscriminately, where everybody's concerned about AI is going to come along and just obliterate all the software out there. That's a little bit of a stretch, but normally when you've got these readjustments, there is a little bit of overreaction, maybe thematically, on the power of AI.
I wonder, people are paying for AI, but of course we're so used to getting stuff on the internet for free. I wonder, will it be possible to induce many consumers to pay $200 a month, for example, for AI?
No, you're hitting on the exact issue, right? Who is going to pay for this? And will it be all just through advertising? I mean, enterprises probably will be willing to pay for all of this assistance. I mean, Copilot is showing up in Microsoft's products right now, and there's a little bit of an extra charge there, and companies are willing to pay for it. But that is at the core of it. How does this get paid for? Is this a subscription model? Is it through advertising? Certainly for corporate clients, they might be more willing to pay for the productivity they're going to see and pick up. But that unequivocally is what markets are worried about. And that has dominated a lot of the conversation around tech earnings. And particularly when they increase their CapEx, right away, the market is asking, wait a second, where's the payout coming from? We need to see more evidence that that's actually happening. So that's going to be the ongoing theme for this year, is how does this get monetized? How does it get paid for?
And broadly, what about Mag 7 stocks? Are you underweight, overweight? Because obviously they are super profitable, many of these companies still.
There's no question. I'd say we're kind of neutral. We're market weight, which many times looks overweight. But it's precisely for that. These are, if you look at the profitability for this coming year, they are just, they're crunching out a lot of cash flow. They really have their act together for the most part, and therefore you can't ignore them. And they're at the core of this, and that's the issue where it's good to be diversified, because to your point, like who is going to pay for this? That's unclear. We think AI is real and it's going to deliver benefits. We're not certain where the actual revenue around paying for that is going to come from. So therefore, in that situation, just spread your bets, which is another way of saying be much more of an index investor. And again, certainly being in more defensive old economy stocks, because if we want to call them that, that's been a benefit right now, because they're more, dividend paying, kind of income producing. So not a bad place to hide out if you want to tilt a little away from tech. But I think broadly, staying kind of index weight is still a good thing in the U.S. stocks at least, or in the U.S. index at least.
Dec, thank you very much indeed. Dec Malarkey of SLC Management. Let's get over to U.S. President Donald Trump.
Tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no, no matter how good a case you have. It's a no. you can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people. Others think they're being politically correct, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court, and it's happened so often with this court. What a shame. Having to do with voting in particular, when in fact they're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. It's a small movement. I won by millions of votes. We won in a landslide. With all the cheating that went on, there was a lot of it, but we still won in a landslide. Too big to rig. But these people are obnoxious, ignorant, and loud. They're very loud. And I think certain justices are afraid of that. They don't want to do the right thing. They're afraid of it. This was an important case to me, more as a symbol of economic national security, and also, I would say, just for our country itself, so important, because we're doing so well as a country. We've never done so well. The good news is that there are methods, practices, statutes, and authorities, as recognized by the entire court in this terrible decision, and also as recognized by Congress, which they refer to, that are even stronger than the IEEPA tariffs available to me as President of the United States. And in actuality, I was very modest in my ask of other countries and businesses because I wanted to do, and it's very important, I wanted to be very well behaved because I wanted to do anything, I didn't want to do anything that would affect the decision of the court, because I understand the court. I understand how they are very easily swayed. I want to be a good boy. I have very effectively utilized tariffs over the past year to make America great again. Our stock market has just recently broken 50,000 on the Dow, and simultaneously, and even more amazingly, broken 7,000 on the S&P, two numbers that everybody thought upon our landslide election victory could not be attained. Think of that. Nobody thought it was possible to do it within 4 years, and we did it in 1 year. They said, you'll never be able, you'll go back and you read the geniuses, read their statements, all of the Nobel Prize winners in economics. They said, no, you couldn't do it in 4 years. Well, we didn't do it in 4 years. We did it in 1 year. We broke every record in the book, and we're continuing to do so. Tariffs have likewise been used to end 5 of the 8 wars that I settled. I settled 8 wars, whether you like it or not, including India, Pakistan, big ones, nuclear, could have been nuclear. Prime Minister of Pakistan said yesterday at the great meeting that we had, the Peace Board, he said yesterday that President Trump could have saved 35 million lives by getting us to stop fighting. They were getting ready to do some bad things. But they've given us great national security, these tariffs have. And together with our strong borders, reduced fentanyl coming into our country by 30%. When I use them as a penalty against countries illegally sending this poison into our country to poison our youth. All of those tariffs remain. They all remain. I don't know if you know that or not. They all remain. We're still getting them, and we will after the decision. I guess there's nobody left to appeal to. But again, those 3 people, such respect. I've had a lot of respect for them anyway, but such great respect. But other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives, great alternatives. Could be more money. We'll take in more money, and we'll be a lot stronger for it. We're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll continue to do so. To show you how ridiculous the opinion is, however, the court said that I'm not allowed to charge even $1. I can't charge $1. Can't charge $1. I would have used 1 penny, but we don't make the pennies anymore. We save money. Can't charge $1 to any country under IEPA. Not $1. I assume to protect other countries. This must have been done to protect those other countries, certainly not the United States of America, which they should be interested in protecting. That's what they're supposed to be protecting. But I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country-destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1. Because that's not what it says. And that's not the way it even reads. I can do anything I want to do to them, but I can't charge any money. So I'm allowed to destroy the country, but I can't charge them a little fee. I could give them a little two-cent fee, but I cannot charge under any circumstances. I cannot charge them anything. Think of that. How ridiculous is that? I'm allowed to embargo them. I'm allowed to tell them you can't do business in the United States anymore. We want you out of here. But if I want to charge them $10, I can't do that. It's incorrect. Their decision's incorrect. But it doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives that have been approved by this decision. You know, they've been approved by the decision for those that thought they had us. And they're saying that I have the absolute right to license, but not the right to charge a license fee. So think of that. I have the right to license, which is a very powerful word. In many ways, license is more powerful than tariffs. In fact, I was thinking about using it. But they came up with the idea that I can license, just like the people that were opposing me told them to do, but not the right to charge a license fee. Think of that. Who ever heard of such a thing? What license has ever been issued without the right to charge a fee? You get a license, you charge a fee. It's automatic, but not with this court. But now the court has given me the unquestioned right to ban all sorts of things from coming into our country, to destroy foreign countries, but a much more powerful right than many people ever thought we even had, but not the right to charge a fee. How crazy is that? Our country is the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. And it was a dead country 1.5 years ago under an incompetent president. But now I'm going to go in a different direction, probably the direction that I should have gone the first time, but I read the language. I'm very good at reading language, and it read our way 100%. But now I'll go the way I could have gone originally, which is even stronger than our original choice. As Justice Kavanaugh, whose stock has gone so up, you have to see, I'm so proud of him, wrote in his dissent, although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. So, think of that. The decision might not substantially constrain. And it doesn't. He's right. In fact, I can charge much more than I was charging. So I'm going to just start. Although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. That's because numerous other federal statutes, which is so true, authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs issued in this case. Even more tariffs, actually. Those statutes include, think of that, those statutes include, for example, the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 232. All of these things I know so well. The Trade Act of 1974, Sections 122, 201, 301. And the Tariff Act of 1930, Section 338, all clear. But it's a little bit longer process. I thought I'd make things simple, but they didn't let us do that. I would like to thank Justice Kavanaugh for frankly, his genius and his great ability. Very proud of that appointment. In actuality, while I am sure that they did not mean to do so, the Supreme Court's decision today made a president's ability to both regulate trade and impose tariffs more powerful and more crystal clear rather than less. I don't think they meant that. I'm sure they didn't.
So the president, they're criticizing, let's put it that way, the the Supreme Court decision to strike down his sweeping global tariffs, praising Brett Kavanaugh, one of the three justices, along with Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, who actually voted against striking down the tariffs, but they were the three dissenters. 6 other members, including 3 conservatives, said the president had overstepped his authority. And really repeating a theme we've heard from the administration, Mr. Trump saying, I'm going to go ahead under other powers that I have. Some of those are more curtailed. At least one of the laws that he could impose fresh measures under would require congressional approval. So this story not over. We're going to have lots more after this. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled against U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs imposed on a so-called emergency powers basis. The court says Trump exceeded his authority by invoking that emergency powers law to slap on these so-called reciprocal tariffs. And also the court ruled against targeted import taxes that were said to address fentanyl trafficking and border security. However, the court was silent on whether importers are entitled to refunds. Those, in theory, could total as much as $170 billion US. Newmont has issued a notice of default to Barrick Mining after it says it found evidence of mismanagement at their Nevada joint venture. Newmont says Barrick diverted resources from Nevada gold mines to benefit its fully owned 4 Mile project. Barrick CEO Mark Hill says he disagrees with the claims, but he's limited by the terms of the agreement on what can be said. Bloc Québécois is pushing for an amendment to the budget bill that would require banks to reimburse customers who experience fraud. The Bloc's finance critic says Canada's Big 5 lenders have dodged responsibility toward customers for too long, adding that this amendment would shift the burden from consumers to the banks. Reported fraud in the first 9 months of 2025 totaled more than $540 million. And there's a look at the TSX hitting a new record high today, although this ruling in particular on the emergency powers tariffs doesn't really affect Canada that much and marginally reduces duties that have been imposed on some goods, but those tariffs on steel, aluminum and autos, for example, remain in place. And let's have a look at the US markets. They have been trading marginally higher as well. In theory, this reduces the burden of tariffs on US corporations, but the White House defiantly insisting it will look at other measures to keep levies in place or to restore them. So the Supreme Court delivering that blow against President Trump's tariff policies. Let's get more here from Laurie Turnbull, professor in the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. Laurie, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Give us your off-the-top reaction. I don't think this was a huge surprise. I mean, there was speculation the Supreme Court might rule this way.
Absolutely. I think what the court is doing is kind of putting a limit on how far Donald Trump can go in terms of trying to use some justification that he can come up with for his tariff strategy. And we know this is totally central to his foreign policy. He has this rhetorical, mission where he wants to tell Americans, look, the rest of the world has been taking advantage of us. we are in an economic situation that is trying for us because there are other countries who are essentially being funded by us. And he puts Canada in that category for sure, where he talks about how Canada is basically, we're dependent on the US and we're not really equal trading partners sort of thing. And so his political strategy has been very much tied to global tariffs and trying to get back what he feels the US is owed. So by putting limits on that, and by the court saying, look, you can't use the emergency power essentially to just do whatever you want tariff-wise, you need congressional authority, the court is trying to put some limits on what Trump is doing.
So this is the first time the Supreme Court has definitively struck down one of Trump's second-term policies. But so far, the court's conservative majority has really given him carte blanche on his policies. So is this a turning point, do you think?
I mean, I think in terms of the court's approach, yes, it is, in the sense that it seems like he can no longer count on the complete blanket support from the court, that there's a stopping point to that. There are some parameters on this. Of course, we can see 3 judges in dissent. So it's not that all 9 judges said, okay, look, we're going to put a stop to this. We still see 3 judges, including Brett Kavanaugh, who President Trump referred to in his remarks, says he's proud of him. He's proud of this appointment because he's honestly, trying to politicize the heck out of this as much as he possibly can and draw attention to the dissenters who said, who tried to, I guess, find a way for him to keep doing what he was doing. But this is a moment, I think, where what really matters, if this is really a turning point, it depends on how President Trump reacts to it. Does he accept this? I mean, from his comments after the fact, it sounds like he doesn't, right? It sounds like he's trying to push on this and say, we're going to find other ways to do this. There are other ways for me to be able to get access to these funds that he feels America is entitled to. But what is Congress's reaction going to be? Like, we can already hear some representatives say, look, like this, not surprised to see the court go this way. Now, what about the importers who perhaps might be owed something? So this is going to create a domestic, blow up politically, in the sense that there certainly will be importers, citizens who are saying, you took this money illegally. Where's my money back?
The Federal Reserve of New York produced research indicating that almost 90% of these tariffs, and we're talking about perhaps $170 billion US collected by the US government, US consumers have paid almost 90% of the cost. But it looks like Trump has skated. The public don't seem indignant over that.
Right. And so I wonder how this is going to play out, leading up to the midterm elections in November. Are we going to see part of the strategy, for example, from Democrats, including Gavin Newsom, who's already, got some balls rolling on this, to say Americans are owed their money back? You took this money illegally. Where are you going to, are you going to make things right with Americans? And so will that be kind of a point of contention between the two parties to see how the president manages that? Because if the Democrats are successful in putting this in terms of not a foreign policy war that Donald Trump is having, right? Not this, like taking it from the context of America's relationship with other countries and putting it directly in the context of Donald Trump's relationship with citizens, and saying, you made Americans pay these tariffs, not other countries. You made our own citizens pay these tariffs, and they want their money back. And so where are you on that?
You are somewhat skeptical that Trump is even interested in renegotiating the CUSMA free trade agreement.
Yes. I mean, I think we can see, if we take his rhetoric seriously at all, he's made a lot of comments around essentially Canada. We don't need Canada. We can do this on our own. Now, we know that's his negotiating strategy. He tries to completely put the other side in a panic. And so then, he kind of benefits from the chaos on the other side. And then he comes in with some kind of a different position. And so we'll see what that amounts to. But I think, even there's a different sense of expectation, I think, now. I think a year ago, people were looking at this and thinking, can we get back to some normal? Can we get back to some predictable relationship with the United States? And I think now the circumstance is more that people think that any agreement that Donald Trump signed, who knows if he'll go through with it anyway. So what's the point? And I think the narrative around diversifying our trade partnerships in Canada, becoming less reliant on the US no matter what, that's taking hold with people. Mark Carney has a broad coalition of support. We can even, I mean, for those who watched, even the NDP leadership debate last night, you can hear Carney's talking points on diversifying trade. And so, I think Canada's showing up differently to these CUSMA negotiations, regardless of what Trump is doing.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Laurie Turnbull, a professor at Dalhousie University. Up next, we're watching shares of Blue Owl Capital. That's the asset manager involved in private credit, facing a looming deadline to return cash in one of its funds. We'll be right back. US-based Blue Owl Capital is facing a looming deadline to return cash in one of its private credit funds. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Olivia Fishlow. Olivia, thanks so much. One fascinating angle here is that this is a fund that was pitched to retail investors. And of course, we've been hearing, retail investors should consider private credit. So it might have implications for that.
Definitely. I think that this is a moment where retail investors are starting to understand that private credit might not be, and in fact is, an illiquid asset. And so we've seen a lot of these funds marketed and sent to retail investors. And I think now there's sort of an understanding that you need to be really aware of, well, how can I get my money back out of these funds if it comes down to it?
They found buyers for a $1.4 billion US portfolio of loans. Interesting that two of our big pension funds, Ontario Municipal Employees and BC Investment Management, were participants in that purchase.
Definitely. I think that, as you said, as retail is becoming a bigger factor in private credit, we've seen funds try to understand, how can I find liquidity? And a lot of times we're seeing that large pensions and large insurance businesses are becoming the buyers of these private credit loans. And I think, in this case, it was a way that Blue Owl decided to create some liquidity in this fund, sell a pool of loans, and as you said, to various firms, and then be able to send some of that money back to the investors in the fund itself. And I think, it's something that we definitely should look out for going forward, of who, at the end of the day, are buying these underlying private credit assets.
Interesting stuff, Olivia. Yeah, we've heard the sales pitch in this country as well. Get into private equity. Yeah. Don't worry, even if you can't check the value of the asset every day. We're going to have to jump. Thank you very much indeed. Olivia Fishlow of Bloomberg. Up next, we're going to check in with Bloomberg Canadian finance reporter Christine Dobby and her weekly newsletter. We got bank earnings coming our way next week, and there's an obsession with return on equity. Let's check in with Bloomberg's Canadian finance reporter Christine Dobby, who writes that weekly newsletter, Bay Street Edition. Christine, thanks very much for joining us. We've got bank earnings coming up next week, and there is something of an obsession with reporting big return on equity numbers.
Hi, Andy. Yes, this has become the new ROE is the new PCL for this year. The banks, a joke only us finance nerds could get. The Canadian bank stocks are pretty highly valued, and this has been a theme for a couple of recent quarters now. I won't quote the PE ratios, but they're high, and they're much higher than historical levels right now. And so it's really coming down to this obsession with seeing that they're making progress on return on equity, or ROE. And over the past year, we've seen a number of the banks increase or move up their targets for their medium-term targets for ROE. You've got RBC and National Bank really at the high end, with their targets being about 17%, and they're already close to that. Meanwhile, BMO is, they're targeting 15%, and they have a ways to go to get there, which can be a good thing for BMO because they can show progress and get rewarded for that by shareholders. And one thing that the banks have been doing to help kind of juice ROE is share buybacks, because they do have a lot of capital that they need to put to work. And buying back shares reduces the number of shares outstanding, which in turn increases ROE. So that's something to look for as well this quarter.
Christine, I have to ask you this. The men's hockey final, Sunday, 8:10 a.m. We know Canada's there and America is in the running. Are you hoping for a Canada-US face-off on Sunday morning?
You know, I think I am. I'm nervous for that, especially after what happened with the women's hockey yesterday. But I think we would all like to see a little friendly rivalry play out, and ideally the Canadian team defeat the Americans on Sunday if we had to choose.
That's right. 8:10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:10 a.m. Pacific.
Yes.
I guess the diehards in BC will be getting up for that. Christine, thank you very much indeed. We're going to have to leave it there.
Andy.
Christine Dobby, now you can sign up for her weekly newsletter, Bay Street Edition, by going to bloomberg.com/newsletters. Let's have a very quick look at the markets before we go, because we got that decision from the US Supreme Court spurning sweeping tariffs that had been imposed by President Trump, saying he didn't have the authority under so-called emergency powers to put on those levies. Canada actually not affected that much, and we still face these so-called Section 232 tariffs on our steel and aluminum and some auto goods. Thank you very much indeed for watching the show.